Matthews, and this morning we are at Alder Creek Farm. It is January during the dormant season, and we have a whole group of people here for our pruning workshop. The Alder Creek Farm is just one piece of the Lower Nehalem Community Trust property, and I have just a very tiny piece in the trust management, and that's the garden. I say it's tiny on one hand, but it's large from a perspective of managing volunteers and programs and projects. So welcome. I'm glad that you came. How many of you have been to this property before? Okay, good. So we have a lot of new people, which is fabulous. And when we're done today, if you're interested in wandering around the garden, I'd be happy to show people around a bit and give you a little bit more information about our community garden program, which we're actually going to open registration next week. So with that, today's focus is on pruning, as you know, and we've got a lot of different types of trees as well as different ages. We've got some heritage trees on both sides of me, and then we've got some newly planted from last year, and then some that I call teenage trees that are mid-size. So we're going to prune each type. David's going to talk about general pruning techniques and practices for a healthy orchard, and you can apply these same learnings to your ornamentals. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David Sipp, and David is a past board member for the trust, as well as he is a arborist, and he owns Ecologic Trees, and he has done work in this area for, I don't know, how many years? 20? Okay, plus. So there you go. Anyway, David's been very helpful to us over the years, getting our trees to the point where they are the most productive and safe. Although I guess we didn't do our lesson on that one that's branching over the top.
We'll get to that.
He'll get to that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, David.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. Good morning, everyone. I've got a quick question, if I may. How many of you have fruit trees on your properties currently? Okay, good. How many of you have already done pruning on your trees in the past? And how many of you felt confident in what you were doing and the desired outcome?
Does confident equate to knowledge, or just go for
Just how you felt. Just how you felt. That's exactly right. And so I think fewer hands on each one, and that's totally okay. And basically what we want to kind of go through here today is some pruning concepts, tree biology, how we prune, but also why we prune, and the effect on the trees. And then also in the end is the aesthetic pleasing outcome of what you want in the end. So it's really a combined process, and it really just begins with understanding the trees a little bit. What we do to a tree has an effect on the tree, and we can balance that. So hopefully at the end of today you'll have a few tools, concepts, and confidence to go home and do that additional pruning on your trees. And so basically when we're pruning our trees, we don't need to do it all at once, of course. So a lot of things can be done in phases over a period of time, over a period of several years. And our trees are in balance. Let's just remember there's the roots and there's the shoots. Half is above ground. Oftentimes we don't think as much about the other half that's below ground. So if we take too much of the shoots off of the tree, there are less photosynthase to feed the roots. And the roots feed the shoots and the leaves, and they need each other. And so they're in balance. So if we consider our trees having that balanced mindset in our head in the beginning, then we can help formulate our plan based upon that. And so when we look at our tree, pick a tree that we're going to prune, we just dive in and just start cutting away. But first we would probably like to have a bit of a plan, and to develop that plan we need to define our goals and priorities and the desired outcome, and then work that backwards, and then we develop a plan. So there are the obvious first things that will need to go from a tree are your dead and damaged and diseased. Take care of those things first. So take a walk around the tree before you even begin, and as we walk around we can look for those things. Are there limbs that are just really overextended, far out? They've broken from previous excessive weight, maybe heavy fruit, really long branches that then are overextended, get laden with the heavy fruit set, they're dropping and drooping, so those long ones can be headed back. And the deadwood, those things of course. And so then when we're done making our walk of the tree, just taking note of those items we know we're going to want to get rid of, then we can begin, do some of that. Oftentimes it'll be helpful with a number of trees like this, just leave your debris there on the ground near that tree. So we're also tracking how much we're removing from a tree. We don't want to take more than say 20, some may say 30% of mass from the tree any given year. So if there's a lot to do to a tree and it's your first visit to that tree, and getting out, well, the dead, let's not really count that because the tree has already shed that, walled that off. That's not live wood that we're worried about. But if a lot of broken, damaged, diseased limbs come out and we've already surpassed that 20-30%, that may be enough for this year. Let it go through the next growing season, observe the effects, and then the following year, maybe then we can do more training, size reduction. So this is all in a phased method. So we've got a few handouts. I've got about 15 of them here. Just a couple flyers that we can go through. You can have this maybe if we go ahead and start these maybe one every other person or so. If we have about 30 here, and I have about 15 of these. So if you came with friends, maybe you can share. We start some of these down at this end. So these
Or you can make a new friend.
two different forms. Two different forms, and we'll just kind of make them around so everybody can at least have one to look over. And we can make these available as well after the fact. If anyone didn't get one and wants one, just let me know afterwards. And so one of them, and I've got a couple others of these as well. The handout that started down there, I've got a couple that have been waterproof. We often come across rain out here, so we can just kind of pass these around. They're the same. You'll be getting these as well. You want to look at, and I can get these back at the end. Just the waterproof ones. We'll probably use them next year. And so to begin with, once we've developed our plan, we're going to go in and start doing some pruning. A couple of simple tools. Of course, we've got our hand snips. This will take care of all of your small pruning, detail pruning more so at the end. We have larger cuts to make. Hand saws are good. This is a nice folding hand saw that you've always got it available. It's nice and sharp. These cut on the pull stroke, and so they're cutting when you're working in this direction. But with these two items, you can just walk around your orchard. Loppers, not too often, I lay them down on the ground to do something and walk away, and you need to remember where they are. So between these two items, I can do everything that can do. And then if you come across something larger, then chainsaws can become necessary. Pull pruners and pull saw, same thing we have on my pocket, only we'll reach the taller material. And we'll be using all of these today as well. So going through just some of the proper pruning techniques, we'll begin with a 3-cut method. So if we have a long, heavy branch, we just start cutting it by the trunk. What happens is that limb falls down, the bottom part tears into the trunk. That's something we want to avoid. So 3-cut method would be the first cut being further out from where you want to make the cut. Make that cut on the bottom. Third, do it halfway up. Cut too far, the branch might pinch it. But cut about a third of the way in. Your second cut is further out away from the trunk, from the top down. And then if that limb sags, wants to break, your bottom cut will prevent that tearing back into the trunk or further back in the limb. And then your third cut is to just finish it off. If you've got this little 12-inch stub, it's easy to hold on to, finish that cut, lightweight, easy to manage. So we want to keep that concept in mind when we're doing our pruning, and that is just to avoid damage to the tree that we want to remain. We want to make nice, clean, smooth cuts. The tree can more easily wall that off. Trees don't heal like our skin heals and regenerates. Trees don't heal that material. What they do is they wall it off. And so they create barrier walls. There's chemical changes that happen at the cellular level to wall off that material and just encapsulate it. And then the tree puts on new growth around that, walls it away, and that damage can then just be held within. And then it becomes sometimes a bit of a race. If you have decay cavities and things we can look at later on today, decay organisms are kind of working on that wood. The tree is trying to put on new wood around it, and that becomes a bit of a race there. But the trees, different trees are more apt to wall things off than others. So that can be species dependent. But the clean cuts will just help offer the best opportunity for the tree to wall that up. And painting wounds, sometimes people ask if we should paint all of these cuts. They used to paint the wounds with tar, thinking that that was, you know, putting paint or putting a Band-Aid on the wound. But really all that does is it still separates. There's a small area of warm, moist material, perfect for microorganisms, bacteria, and fungi to grow. So, learned over the years, the tree will wall it off as long as we make the proper cut, let nature take its course. The tree can take care of itself. So that's a little bit of the pruning guidelines there. That's what this one is that you're looking at, just as a reference. Nice big below it to remember there. So then when we're looking at our dead, damaged, and diseased, we've got a good example over here we'll get to later. There was some internal decay in the limb. Too much weight had finally cracked, and so that's damage beyond repair. We can see that that's going to get finished off today, but a good little example we'll be able to look at later on. Large mature trees, there may be more deadwood and things to see. We'll go through and remove all that deadwood first, look for your damaged and broken and all of that, and then if we see some that are excessively diseased, fruit trees are known for getting a lot of canker, and so we'll see canker on some branches. If there's just a little bit, we do want to cut those off because they can sporulate each year. We can get that out of the tree and remove it. You'll also find some old heritage apple trees that are just riddled with canker, and if you cut out all of the diseased material, there would be no tree left. So all of these things need to be in balance, of course. And so then you'll see these old trees with, this one is an example, hollow cavity in the trunk. We'll be able to look at that. And what can you do? It's fine. If the tree is still living, it's still producing fruit, we don't worry about it. Okay? It's there. The tree is taking care of itself. While there is some damage we can't get rid of, that's all right. As long as the tree is still surviving, it's okay to overlook some of these things. So there are no set, rigid standards that must be adhered to. This is still a flexible process. It's not rocket science. Once we have some of these basic guidelines of proper pruning and style and technique, then there's leeway as well. This tree over here is an example. It used to be an upright tree, and we'll see there's a little bit of the root mass left with some suckers coming up from it. But the tree has a hollow cavity in the trunk. It tipped over. Should we remove the tree or not? Well, it's still got some root contact with the ground. Let's let it go and see what happens. If it dies, we'll remove it then.
Is that like the far side where it's like again? Is that good? I mean, is that okay? Or is that
Yeah, that's okay. It's kind of supporting itself there. And so rather than just jump to it and remove it because it tipped over, we just decided to let it go. That was 10 years ago by now.
We didn't hear the question. We didn't hear the question.
Oh, okay. He was just asking about if there's a spot where a branch was on the ground and coming back up again, if that's okay. So when the tree tipped over, this branch is now on the ground and supporting the tree. It's now acting as a bit of a leg. And the branch is up, and we still have growth on the tree. So basically, this tree fell over. It's got a cavity in the trunk. Should we remove the tree because it fell over? There's still some root contact with the ground, at least half of it, and so here 10 years ago that happened. We still have a horizontal fruit tree that's still producing. It can happen, and that's okay. So when we get to our fruit trees, there's mature tree pruning. This is a bit of that, and then the young tree pruning, training trees for the future growth. Now, as we walk around, we'll see some examples, and we'll do some pruning. but setting the initial framework, scaffold limbs, spacing between your primary branches when you're training a new young tree. That little bit of pruning will set the stage for future growth where you want it to be directed, and then we can just maintain that over the years. And that little bit of annual pruning will keep them in check and in size. So the pruning that we'll do as far as thinning goes, I believe it was on the other handout that I gave you, kind of simple 3 steps to begin by cleaning out that dead material and broken branches, and then after that, then we go into the thinning. So on this one, we'll just kind of flip through it a little bit. Excuse me. Doing the cleaning, it refers to the 3 Ds, the dead, damaged, and disease there. I'm on page 2. And then they'll talk about sprouts, suckers coming from the base of the tree. Most all of our fruit trees will have the one variety that is grafted onto a rootstock of another tree. That's for a variety of reasons and disease resistance and things. But typically, your fruit, the fruit tree you're growing has been grafted onto another rootstock above the roots, and you may see the little bit of a kink to it where the graft was attached. And once it takes off, then the original parent stem is removed. And so then we have this graft with the new varietal on a different rootstock. So if there are sprouts coming from the ground level, we know they're coming from that parent rootstock. It's a different variety of tree than what you're growing above ground. Feel free to get those taken off. Just remove those as they appear, and that's fine. Again, small cuts near the tree. And then the next thing, when we're looking at cleaning things out, we'll take care of the broken, and we want enough space between the limbs, 6-12 inches, adequate space between limbs, not too crowded, and if there are crossing and rubbing branches, at least one of those will go. Something that is originating on an outer portion of the tree and then growing back in through the center of the canopy, those will be some of the first things that we see and look at. Start getting rid of all of this material. So you've got your crossing and rubbing limbs, duplicates, if there are 2 limbs that are horizontal to each other and they're just parallel, doesn't have to be horizontal, but they're parallel, one of those 2 can maybe go. So that's where we're getting just adequate spacing between our limbs. Yes?
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to ask a question about the root sprouts, the water things that come up. Is there a better time to cut those off? Because sometimes when you cut them off, then they come back in fusion again. So,
That
what's
can
the best
happen.
time to do that?
Well, there again, we're kind of doing our fruit tree pruning in the winter, and so I would do it then. And there again, it's because the tree is dormant, and so when the tree is actively growing, if we do our pruning in the summertime, let's pretend the tree is awake and it's actively growing, taking up and producing photosynthetes, and everything is active. So if we do that pruning in the summertime, the tree is aware, let's say, that it's lost X amount of root leaf mass and it wants to replace it. And then that's what will genetically cause your water sprouts and your shoots to form. So that's the primary reason why we're doing the fruit tree pruning in the wintertime. So I would do the root sprouts at the same time. And then there again, same thing with the timing. Thank you for the question, because that does bring up the point of the timing. We're going through the why and the when. And that's the main reason why, is because in the wintertime, let's say the tree is now asleep. So if we kind of do our pruning and it's done judiciously, the tree will then, when it wakes up in the spring, be less aware that any pruning took place. And then it helps minimize that sprouting effect that you'll see that results from pruning events. And that kind of gets us through the thinning portion when we're talking about our branch angles and what we want to prune or retain and how to make those judgments. Your upright water sprouts typically won't be having fruiting spurs and producing fruit, so those can go away for that reason. Sometimes in regenerative pruning we may manage those water sprouts and head them back and reduce them to try to initiate fruiting spurs and things on those branches, but typically those will go away. Branches hanging straight down and down to the ground, those will most likely go away. Your most effective fruiting limbs will be in the horizontal to 20-degree, somewhat elevated branches. Those will produce the most fruit, and things that are hanging straight down are going to be less fruit producers, so they can basically go away as well.
When you say the water spurs, you're talking about the ones that are coming kind of vertical off the main trunk,
Yeah,
not from
or
the rootstock.
right. So you've got your rootstock, those sprouts,
Suckers.
Yes, exactly. And then water sprouts will typically be what you see from a pruning cut, and dormant buds then emerge and start growing, and they're just growing straight up. And those are the water sprouts, technically adventitious shoots, but yeah, we totally refer to them as water sprouts. And you'll see that near especially large heading cuts. And so that's where the pruning guidelines, if we're going to make a cut heading back, longer branches, and we want to do that so they don't get so overextended and heavy with fruit, hang, sag down, and break and snap. So heading back our branches annually allows them to just grow in diameter, and we just keep pruning those back each year. And that's the heading back is on the next page, step 3, page 4, and that's the minor pruning we'll get to. As we look around these trees, we'll see the evidence of that, and we'll just get to maintain that process we have going on. And then at that point in time, once you have your structure set, and we're just maintaining, monitoring how much debris we're taking out of the tree, once we kind of have that framework set, it's just kind of a annual cycle. Let the branches grow out a bit, they're producing their fruit, and then we can just kind of annually let it grow out and prune it back, let it grow out and prune it back, and that keeps that going, maintaining the size of our tree. And once we get through that process, I think we are ready to kind of go to work on some of these. Are there any questions before we get started? Yes?
Well, I just have a question about, we have one tree here that years ago somebody planted a pollinator garden underneath it, and then we've really worked hard to get the pollinator garden established, but now the pear tree is shading it out progressively more every year, so I'd love to look at, you know, what are the possibilities there.
Sure. And then partly that will be where's the sun tracking, and if some thinning can be done to the tree to allow some more light through, but if too much thinning to get enough light that we want in this area, if too much thinning is harmful for the tree, well, maybe we can think about, do we need to move the pollinator garden, or that's a matter of balance and priorities as well. Same thing if we have two trees side by side and we want to allow a little space for each, which is your preferred tree, then I would do more work on the other tree. And so that's just a matter of priorities and goals at that point, and that's all a case-by-case basis. Once we get to that point, if there's something that's just in your way, walking up the pathway here this morning, how many people had to duck under a sharp, thorny branch? Yeah. So there's just a reason for pruning there. Not so much with any aspect of health to the tree or fruiting. Something's in your way, it can go, that could be pruned any time of year. We don't have to restrict ourselves to pruning at just this time. If during the summer some branch sags and it's in your way and you're ducking under it over the sidewalk, that's okay. Go ahead and prune it then. There are no strict, rigid rules. Let's use these standard guidelines as a basis to get started. Are there any other questions? Yes, one.
Do these basic techniques and rules apply to non-fruit trees like a magnolia as well, or is it strictly just for fruiting?
No. Your pruning principles will apply to all trees.
Okay.
Absolutely. Our 3-cut method, dead, damaged, and diseased, airflow, spacing, especially with magnolia, they can be disease susceptible as well. So part of the reason for our thinning of the trees, allowing proper light and airflow penetration, light to the northern side of the tree so it can produce more fruit, and also airflow helps reduce the potential for some of those disease issues.
So one of the things that, I don't know if you covered cleaning your tools.
The sterilization, well, we're just getting into that now
Okay,
as we're
great.
getting into the pruning itself.
Okay.
Sterilizing your tools is good when you're going from one tree to another, especially. It doesn't have to be after every cut, but from one tree to another, especially if you know you've been working with some diseased tissue rather than spreading that to another tree. Sterilizing isopropyl alcohol, Lysol, 10% bleach solution can work as well. Any of those things are good to use on your tools.
And dip it for a good 20 seconds.
Yeah, just kind of leave it in there.
Yeah, leave it in there. So that's what's in this jar. So if you brought your own tools, please sterilize them before we use them, because we don't know, we don't want to cross-contaminate with anybody. So, and when you're done and you want to go back home, you can use our alcohol again and sterilize your tools and then wipe them off with this. We're going to split into 3 groups. David's going to take a group. Irv is our orchard manager. Irv, there's your song. So Irv manages the orchard and a team of gardeners who do work throughout the 9-month garden season, and he guides them in the proper care of the orchard, and that's everything from pruning to weeding to feeding to watering to replanting, because we do plant some new trees periodically. And then we also have an espalier, which he will prune himself, because that is a very very precise need of type of pruning. But we have that whole team that works on orchard and orchard issues that he leads. So he's going to lead the other group.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Hand raised when-
Okay, great.
Before we break into groups, maybe 2. There was one question back there.
But I'm just wondering about like using hydrogen peroxide as is that fine? Does that affect the tools at all?
Not so much for sterilization purposes. I mean, it works on us. But the isopropyl alcohol and the Lysol or the
And
bleach,
bleach,
they'll be stronger, more effective.
Yeah, hydrogen peroxide is only 3%, so it's.
Well, I had just watched this video about cleaning with all different products.
You can read lots of different videos. Sorry, just to say you can get in the answer, but
It will do some cleaning, maybe some sterilizing, but will it sterilize to the degree
For
or
those
level
diseases.
that we're looking for?
And one of the things that we do here in the garden is it's all organic, and we utilize the Oregon State University Master Gardener Program and their learning, because it's all fact-based study. And so we want to make sure that because there are a lot of home remedies and things that you can do that might work, but we try to go with the education university-based elements. So.
I still see, you can look online, and some people will still recommend painting the wounds. And you can still find tree paint for sale.
Yeah.
Because people will buy it, they will make it and sell it. It doesn't mean it's proper technique.
Good one.
Yes, one more question.
Yeah, are you going to touch on thinning the apples themselves? You know, you get hundreds of
thinning
apples.
the fruit. Yeah.
I get too many apples, and I've been thinning them out, but they're still the ones that I leave. It must be too many because they're small.
We did that in June with the natural fruit bar,
Yeah,
right?
there's different ways to do that as well. One, remove select branches. You'll have fewer buds.
Yeah.
But then also, you can go along prior to bud break, leaf bud. You can go along and you can just hand rub off some of the fruiting buds. That will reduce some. And then after fruit sets and after flowering and the fruit is beginning to form, and you see you've just got a bumper crop, you can leave that and you can have a huge amount of smaller apples. If you're juicing or something, doesn't matter. But if you're looking for more show quality fruit, then going along and say removing half of the fruit from a tree will result in fewer fruit but bigger fruit. And there again, it's energy allocation. The tree has X amount of energy to use that is drawing up from the roots, and leaves are photosynthesizing and creating that energy that's gone back into the tree. It's a finite resource, and so the allocation is root growth, shoot growth, defenses, fruit production, all of these things, the tree has a 100% amount of energy to use. It's allocated various ways, and you can manipulate that.
And
through
with,
pruning.
and with apple trees in particular, they grow typically in sets of 5. And so some of the Orchard Society recommendation is to remove all but one and then 6 inches between any
6
bundles.
inches?
So we actually have some professional, past professional orchardists, and they're part of our garden, and they're shaking their heads. Yeah, so there you go.
We got confirmation.
Yeah, we got confirmation. Okay, with that, let's split into groups. Again, Irv, David, and I are going to be taking groups. My group is going to be working on quince first, and that's a fruit tree. We've got 3 of those. Did you guys decide which pairs are you going to do those?
We haven't decided yet. Won't get broke up or anything like that. And then also, while we're walking around today, here come the clappers. As we're walking around today, feel free to note a couple of the things we discussed. This large broken limb over here, obviously damaged, but you can kind of look at that. There is a cavity inside, and the torsional, you can see the torsional twisting motion that it broke in. This tree behind the camera, about chest height, there's a large cavity in there. You can take a peek in there and stick your arm in if you're brave. It's a sizable cavity in that tree. This tree has been here for a long time. Just having the cavity, it's there. It's okay. But there's plenty of these items that we touched on. Anybody and whoever's first to get to the low-hanging branch over the pathway, have at it. We'll all appreciate that throughout the rest of the day. And thank you all for coming and being here, and thank you for your assistance with our trees, and I hope that you appreciated a little bit of the knowledge or confidence we've hopefully instilled in you today. With that, let's get started. Thank you.
So for splitting up, let's do about 10 in each group. Maybe there'll be 13 or 12 in some. There you go. Yeah. And read, if you'll read Karen David's that are laminated or in the... Okay, so my group, I'm going to have 10 people.
On it. So there again, as we begin by walking around the tree, looking, taking note of, we probably want to do something there. Okay, note to self. There's some upright branching there we want to take care of. As we walk around, proper spacing, crossing and rubbing, interior branches, something's coming from an outside, going back through, again looking at our spacing. And if you're looking through a tree and you can kind of see good light through one portion and it's just really thick in another portion, that area, you can kind of note to self, may require a little bit more work than another part of the tree that may not require as much. So by getting a general overview from around the tree, you're setting your priorities, developing your plan, and then go in, do some work, take care of your biggest priorities first, step back, take another walk around the tree, go back in, do some more work, and then at the end, you whittle it down to just a little bit of aesthetic pruning, perhaps. That can be based upon your vantage point. Whatever area you view the tree from the most and you want it to be a little more aesthetic in that area, you might do something a little different. Or are you viewing it from the window of your house or out in the yard at a sitting area? Those you can take a little extra look at from those angles as well.
Generally, are you trying to keep the center of the tree open? In this example, there's one big branch going right down the center. I would have thought that maybe you would want to take that out.
For the most part, and then there's different styles of tree structure. Central leader tree with scaffold branches coming off of it. That's one style of fruit tree. Or open base shape would be another, where maybe you have 4 or 5 primary stems coming out from a radiating fashion, and you're keeping the central clear. So there again, tree to tree variability there. So as we look at this tree, kind of walking around, we noted some upright, not necessarily water sprouts there, but just long, upright growing.
Are you pointing to these guys? Right?
Yes, exactly. And then so then walking around, there's a little bit of that here. And so maybe a little bit of a reduction pruning. Not necessarily everything is going all the way down. pruning to a bud pointing in the direction you want the future growth to go. So as we look at branches, buds kind of radiate around. Some are opposite, some are alternate, some radiate around. But where you make a pruning cut, you'll want to look at where that bud is, and whichever direction that bud is pointing, that's where your future growth will go. So if we have something upright and we prune it to a bud that's pointing to the interior of the tree, our future growth is going to go that way, kind of the opposite of what we want. So on something like that, we would prune it to an outward facing bud. When we're looking at our fruiting spurs, we want to retain as many of those. This is 1 year's growth. We follow it back and kind of see the ring there. And then there's other dormant buds there as well. It'll be easy to see our fruiting spurs on this tree. We've got a lot of already starting to push a little bit. So then with something like this, we could prune back to a vegetative bud, leaf bud, that is pointing out this way. We reduce some length and maintain that branch, allowing this to be fruiting in this area.
Can you tell the difference between the fruiting and the leaf bud? I know you just talked about that.
Yeah, you'll see, well, your leaf buds on this tree, but there's just a fine line there. They're growing out. Main thing with your fruiting spurs is you'll see, just like a tree has growth rings, putting on an annual growth ring. Fruiting spurs will have that as well, where it puts on just a tiny bit of growth, and it'll look like condensed. And so those are still your annual growth rings, but where your vegetative shoot puts out a foot or more of growth in 1 year from one bud, one growing season, your fruiting spurs to put on that little bit each year. And so those are your fruiting spurs, because they're still putting on that annual growth, but it's just condensed and reduced. So that's one way to tell those. Primarily, your fruiting spurs just have many of those rings tightly compressed. Going to the interior, some other sprouts growing in here. This is some interior area that can use a little bit of work. And once we get rid of all of these crossing branches growing through the interior, we'll see that what's left is open material arching outward. We've opened up light and airflow penetration through that area. So as we get going on these, here's a bit of a broken branch. It snapped at some point in time. It's still here and attached. So we'll get rid of that as well.
So for this one that you're going to get rid of in the middle, would you cut all the way down to the main?
On this one I probably will, and we can see where this is a sprout that had been pruned before, and it was left as maybe we'll keep something with it. We could begin with this or this. We know what we're getting out of in there. Do one thing or not. We'll start with that. And so out of these three, maybe we want to keep one. And again, with this garden, as a demonstration garden, we do a lot of things for showing examples, so that we still have it there next year to use as an example as well.
So, we need to kind of look around on this tree, look at dead and damaged first. And so if we were to take the dead and damaged off, would that be about 30% or less? And so then we would continue pruning beyond that. So let's wander around the tree and take a look and tell me what you see.
What happened to that guy?
Yeah, well,
There is some damage.
windstorm. Yeah,
Early.
yeah.
That's from a couple years ago.
That's from a couple years ago. And this here looks like it's also healed off. But, we've got a branch here that is rubbing. So we could potentially take that off.
It's a really unhealthy angle.
It is an unhealthy angle. So that's what I would do, is I would choose to take that one off. And then we've got an awful lot going around here. So we could maybe take off some of the clutter, if you would. So possibly this that's going straight up, and this that's also headed that way. So
What about kind of that one in the middle? Like it's getting so tall. Like
this, you mean?
That, yeah. That
It's kind of self-limiting in height. It's not going to get much taller, but yes, we would probably take some of that height down. But that is step 4, 3.
Yeah.
Step 3.
But I was just wondering because you were taking out that other branch, but I was wondering,
Yeah.
would you eventually take out that tall branch just because it's always
No.
going to be going out? No.
No, I don't think I would.
Just bring it
I will just, head it back a bit. Yeah.
So you said you could tell that that was walled off. How can you tell that?
Uh,
Or you just experience?
I think it's just, yeah.
It's coloration.
Yeah,
Because the rest of it hasn't died yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and you can tell that it's kind of healed itself. If you come in close, you can see
Yeah, no, I
like
see
a
what you're
scar
talking
tissue,
about. Yeah.
if you will. So that has walled itself off, and it's not. If it was a fresh injury, you could also see some weeping, possibly.
Right.
Yeah. So for the first removal of a branch, I'm going to have a volunteer. And what we want
The
to do.
other thing that this branch does is it's crossing over.
Right, it is crossing over. So what we always want to do is we'll take a bottom cut to start so that we don't have tearing or ripping, and then we'll come back up and cut back.
Karen?
So you'll need to cut at this angle to begin with.
That branch just above your head looks kind of funny where it reaches the tree. You can see it better from this side.
Okay.
The great big one.
Yeah.
It's broken. It's broken way down.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the way down to here.
Oh, it sure is.
So whereabouts
Is that
do you want
healed
me to...
too?
Yeah,
That
that's
doesn't
fine.
look healed. On the top.
Yeah, it is all
so
healed. Yeah,
here.
there's a nice scab there.
That's what she was saying.
What?
Okay, I can.
It's sort of the same,
Wound cut again.
but it's nice and
So there's
stable.
another
It's
branch
not
right
like
It's stable, yeah, and it is, and it's coming out and
Take
it's
this one
filling
off?
out this. So if we were to take this whole thing out, it would really leave a big hole here. So I would, if it's,
I think this will work.
yeah, and again, that bottom cut is to keep it from ripping
You
when.
might do it from this
He's
side.
going to take this
I
little
do
guy
it from
out of
the
the way.
outside like this. Because the way you're doing it, you're going to start cutting back there. I do it from here.
You want to take this little
He was
guy
gonna
out?
take the little guy
Stand
off
over here and just do it like this.
Okay.
And then there won't be any.
Poor Indian.
Yeah. How many changed from poor Indian?
I was trying to take this off first.
Just that one little bit.
Yeah.
We're pruning this apple tree. This is an early golden delicious tree, and we're taking off the limbs that cross over, like this here where it crosses over another limb, and then we're maybe cutting off a few of the suckers that we don't need, and trying to thin out some of the apples and keep it open in the middle so it has airflow, reduces any disease and makes it healthy, reduces mold and we get a little bit of, in this area, fungus. And then we want to balance the tree. This tree is an old heritage tree. It's re-rooted itself, but we're still using it and it gives us some really good apples.
And can you cut, this cut, like, I've got it kind of, I'm not sure if I'm making my cuts right.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't worry about it very much.
Okay.
It tend to make it perpendicular across.
Okay. I always thought kind of more cutting flusher to the tree, but
Sometimes you might want to leave a few inches or a little bit to make like one bud. You can kind of hope to get a bud out of it.
And would you guys really thin out a lot of, again, water spray?
Was started in 2004 by a grassroots effort with 5 families who decided to purchase some property that was coming available. It had been a dairy farm and the farmer was getting ready to retire. So they decided rather than have it go into housing development or some other type of use, they wanted to preserve it for the animals and all the natural plants and processes that occur in our area. We have a very fragile ecosystem here at the coast, and everything's connected by water, air, and all of the soil elements. So they, being very conscious about environmental processes, decided they'd pool their money, purchase the property, and then set off to become a nonprofit entity. It took a little while to do that, but They were able to create a land trust, which is a nonprofit, and that's how we got started. Since then, we have put together lots of other properties, some which are donated outright, and others that we have purchased with the help of our community. And we now have over 300 acres. This property, the first one, is 54 acres, but we've built that over the years. 50 of our first 54 acres is in conservation, and the rest is in either the garden, the barn, greenhouse, that sort of thing. My job here is to manage the community garden process, and we have a lot of interaction with our community as a result of that. But the bigger picture is the land trust and preserving all those other acres and acres of property that is used for conservation and holding that land in its natural state in perpetuity, so that future generations can enjoy the flora and fauna of the natural world here at the Oregon coast. So if you're interested in learning more about the trust, we do have a web page. We also have a very active volunteer crew that's not only at the garden but also works on stewardship projects. We reforest some of our areas. We have a big project right now that we've planted over 800 trees this year alone. And it's just a really great opportunity to help influence natural areas that will stay for your grandchildren's grandchildren's grandchildren. So please come and visit us. Our webpage is nehalemtrust.org. Take a look at our webpage and give our office a call if you're interested in learning more. Thank you.